Hi everyone, 7th out of 10 Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the classic, because it's a classic review, of My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade. This is the seminal 2006 album from Newark, New Jersey band My Chemical Romance. The mid-2000s. They were an interesting time for music, to say the least. I lived it, I was there, and maybe this is a sign of me getting old, but I can't help but feel like things were just simpler back then. Things just made more sense on the internet when all you had to worry about was your MySpace top 8. But simultaneously, it is not a time that I would want to go back to. George Bush president, internet porn takes forever to download, and you can't listen to Death Grips yet? No thank you. And while genres like pop punk and emo were certainly at their peak of popularity, I personally at the time didn't feel like they were at their peak of creativity. Don't get me wrong, at the time MCR was an amazing breath of fresh air. When the exhilarating 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge came out, it was like a bomb going off. I'm not a fucking K! But for every MCR we had, there were like 10 more bands trying to be the next Simple Plan or Taking Back Sunday. And back then, it's not like there weren't tons of new or contemporary bands that I liked. White Stripes, Strokes, Bright Eyes, Against Me, Blood Brothers, Death from Above 1979, Modest Mouse. Most of the rock I listened to that wasn't old school punk was oriented around indie, post-hardcore, metalcore, and even though I grew up loving the power pop and pop punk of the 90s, the more commercially successful records in these genres in the 2000s were just a turnoff for me. They sounded melodramatic, overblown, formulaic, not nearly as fun, catchy, or chock full of personality as Enema of the State or Dookie. So by the time 3 Cheers came out in 2004, this was a trend I was already absolutely sick of, which is why I was surprised when I came across 3 Cheers working at my college radio station and thought it was kind of good, despite typically disliking anything at the time that had an album cover that looked anything like this. But seriously, here's a record that could go blow for blow with any other pop punk or emo album out at the time in terms of volume, vocal dramatics, and yet the singing is actually great. The songs are addictive and the vibe is genuinely dark and kind of edgy. I'm down, or at least I was in a somewhat quiet way because, as a self-conscious 20-something who thought he was into more artsy, meaningful music, and still had things like guilty pleasures, I didn't spend nearly enough time openly praising this record as I should have. And over the years, 3 Cheers has, in my opinion, aged amazingly. Even though The Black Parade is perceived to be the bigger and more ambitious record, in many respects 3 Cheers is just as good. But for a band of MCR's obvious talent, staying simply within the confines of pop punk or emo was going to be an impossibility. Their ambitions on their next record would drive them to a higher calling, writing and co-producing an album that would be a contribution to the hallowed halls of rock opera. Well-respected but rarely attempted, rock operas can be pretty tricky and risky. And there are some ways in which The Black Parade famously doesn't live up to the grand expectations of the genre. There are cuts where the instrumentation just isn't lavish or epic enough. The narrative and general message of the LP is not really all that linear or clear some of the time, though there are certainly consistent themes of death, illness, cancer, bravely facing down or accepting the end of your life. So even though there are great tracks here that reinforce those ideas, there are others that detour into something only tangentially related, whether that be living recklessly or having an irrational fear of teenagers. So while The Black Parade may not be as focused narratively as a The Wall or Bat Out of Hell or Tommy, The Black Parade is still pretty grand in presentation, theatrical as well, especially given the cabaret influence dictating the sound of cuts like Mama or the bonus track Blood. So the Black Parade's embrace of rock opera might mostly just be for aesthetic purposes, but no harm, no foul, because it just adds to the entertainment value of the album, as does the band's embrace of glam rock or hard rock on some tracks here too. If anything should be celebrated on this album, it's how the band creatively crosses over between the melodrama of emo and the melodrama of so many strains of rock to come before it. That and how punchy and infectious much of this record is. The whole thing kicks off with the campy but gratifying The End. The Bowie influence on this track is heavy as hell. The pronounced acoustic guitar strumming along with the singing that sounds like something out of a theater production. Then an explosion of soaring guitar harmonies, touches of piano too. A gargantuan passage where we get all of these huge, deeply layered vocal harmonies, which are really one of the biggest selling points of the record. We get a flawless transition into the track Dead, which is aided by a flat line of an EKG. Punchy, crunchy, jaunty guitar chords. It's a really fun and lively track. The band is just really yucking it up on this song with the squawking guitar soloing, some of the shredding too. It's a stark contrast from the incredibly grim lyrics, where our very ill patient character is being told they have 2 weeks left to live. Which, again, bold juxtaposition going on here between the lyrics and the music, but emo and punk have a long history of turning negatives into energetic and rowdy music. Following the same storyline, the vibe turns absolutely sinister on the track How I Disappear, where the lyrics not only equate death with the erasure of someone's memory, their personhood, but also we have the idea being toyed with of talking to someone that you love in a seance from beyond the grave, trying to make a romantic connection while they're, I guess, a ghost, a specter. It's a great song, but once again, it's the pumping pop-punk guitars and the soaring vocal harmonies that really sell it. The dark, goth, punk edge of this record only intensifies on the sharpest lives, but it's Welcome to the Black Parade that's really the crown jewel of the first leg of the record. The iconic, descending, lonely piano line that kicks the song off, with Gerard Way singing theatrically about the recollection of a childhood memory, seeing a marching band, the Black Parade, which is obviously metaphorical for some kind of transition into death. When I was a young boy, my father. The hook on this track seems to be antithetical to some of the messaging on How I Disappear, though, because this track is very much about someone's memory lasting and living on after death. Keep in mind at the point we're hearing this, the guitars, the instrumentation have gone completely pop-punk, and the way we transition out of this into more Queen-inspired guitar soloing, marching drums, vocal harmonies, it's pure fireworks. We then get the heart-wrenching slow jam, I Don't Love You, a tragic tension release considering all of the lavish and throttling pop-punk tunes that brought us to this point. The variety in the track list here continues onto House of Wolves, that features some grimy, distorted walking bass as well as some tom-heavy drums that both sound like something out of like a jazz song. These passages transition tightly into these synced-up guitar chords and drums that pretty much sound like something out of the Kiss playbook. At this point, everything MCR is doing is just an impressive juggling act, with all the ideas they're working into this very menacing and grim brand of pop-punk. Then with the track Cancer, we get a quality piano ballad with some rich vocal harmonies and strings that feel like some Beatles Baroque pop worship on the back end. The biggest impact on this track, though, go to the lyrics, which are unapologetic as well as brutal, talking about how our protagonist is never going to marry, how they are counting down their days, they're soggy from the chemo. We then transition suddenly into something a bit zanier on the track Mama, with its oompa drum beats and Eastern Bloc melodies. What the band is doing on this track doesn't sound too much unlike the gypsy punk sounds that groups such as Gogol Bordello would popularize just a year earlier. Not to mention there's no one group singularly that brought these cabaret and folksy sounds into the genre anyway. I mean, look at early Dresden Dolls or Flogging Molly. I will say though, with this track, MCR easily has one of the more entertaining takes on this fusion, especially considering they went all out with a literal Liza Minnelli feature that still sounds to this day absolutely insane. The band kind of eases up on the speed with the track Sleep to create a thunderous interpretation of alternative rock. The overabundance of bass and reverb and searing screams on this track leaves our protagonist feeling like they're slipping down into an impenetrably dark abyss. And considering some of the track's final refrains of just sleep, just sleep, just sleep, that's pretty much the case. The song Teenagers is a somewhat funny detour in the track list that I alluded to earlier in the review. It doesn't seem to reinforce much of anything else narratively on the album, but still I would say this song was absolutely necessary for the time. Considering the band's very young fan base, the track lyrically addresses an overabundance of fear and worry societally about teenagers at large, kind of mocking the attitude with these over-exaggerated rock and roll riffs and shouty sing-along choruses. It sort of puts the idea of trying to control the next generation's feelings feelings and thoughts to get them to comply with everything previous generations want into perspective, as prior to this we worried about hippies and hippie culture ruining teenagers, as well as heavy metal and gangster rap and emo and now social media and all this other shit. At this point, we're nearing the end of the album. We get another very narrative-heavy power ballad with Disenchanted. It's easily one of the most crushing moments on the album, with our protagonist pretty much coming to the conclusion that their death is meaningless and the life they led up until this point doesn't really mean much either. I would say there's a lot of snark on the chorus talking about how it's just a sad song that we're listening to with nothing to say. It's hard to tell if the track is a commentary on the character and their feelings about death or the act of writing a sad song about something in general. But what is clear in the verses is that our main character, again, is not all that impressed with their existence up until this point. I spent my high school career spit on and shoved to agree so I could watch all my heroes sell a car on TV, bring out the old guillotine, we'll show them what we all mean. But I guess when writing and sequencing the album, the band didn't necessarily want to end things off on such a dreary and maybe nihilistic note. With the quickness, the narrative of this record changes up with the last full song, Famous Last Words, which is a righteous rock song about pushing forward, overcoming, persevering. I mean, it feels great. It's a great attitude, it's well written, it's well produced, but I have to say, the lyrics aren't nearly as specific as they are on the drearier cuts here. Maybe that has to do with, I don't know, the attitude of not wanting to dwell on the negative. But I think the sudden emotional shift that we see at this point on the album can be pretty representative of when you're dealing with things like depression or anxiety. All some people can truly do is do their best to survive their emotional highs and lows, their demons. And even though much of this album is portrayed as being about a patient with a terminal illness, it's also really just about that. So overall, Black Parade, great album. Classic album. The performance, songwriting, production, style, narrative, even if it is choppy, are all really great. Despite what flaws it has, this thing still manages to sit around the peak of modern pop punk. I highly recommend it. I encourage anyone who loves it to go back and love it again. Anyone who hasn't heard this record before, give it a try with everything I have said in mind. That is it. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you should check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, MCR, Black Parade, forever.